Hi, my name is Laura, and welcome to my podcast, Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations, and through these discussions, you will hear why 9 times out of 10, the book wins. I'll also share different behind-the-scenes trivia I've discovered in my research, which by learning makes the story all the more interesting. If you love either books, movies, or both, this is the perfect podcast for you. This probably already goes without saying, but there will be spoilers for both the book and the movie in this podcast. So if you plan on reading the book or watching the movie, go do that first, and then come back and listen to this. And now, without further ado, let's get right into it. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. Today we are talking about the book A Long Way Home, which is a memoir by Saroo Brierley, published in 2013. And then the movie is named Lion, directed by Garth Davis, and was released in 2016. And for today's podcast, I have another guest. So my second podcast with a guest. So I have my sister Emily here today.
Hello.
So a quick synopsis for this story. I'll keep it brief. It's a memoir, so it's a true story. So when Saroo was 5 years old, he lived in India, and then he got on a train he shouldn't have, and he ended up in Calcutta, which was like 2,000 kilometers from home. And he ended up in an orphanage and then was adopted by an Australian family who loved him, and it was a really good upbringing. And then when he was 30, he used Google Maps to find his hometown, and he was reunited with his birth family. The movie aside, what were your thoughts on the book, Emily?
I thought it was really good. I thought his story was pretty inspiring. You know, he felt like giving up at a lot of points and took breaks, but he kept on going back to it because he obviously felt something.
That pull.
Yeah, he felt that family pull.
Yeah. And was there any moments or, like, did you end up highlighting any parts that really stood out to you or any sections of the book that you felt were powerful?
I think once he was, this is probably obvious, but when he was reunited with his mom, that was pretty powerful. Just, what they said and she, just things that they said and the things that he found out about his family after.
And I thought it was interesting too because, so I mentioned this in my podcast for being Flynn, but I think this, like, the theme of a child being reunited with an estranged parent is like I find it really interesting to read about. Mm-hmm. And no matter how many times you read it, like, it's always like a powerful story because there's something about like being separated from a parent, whether they like left the child or whether it was like this where it was a mistake.
Yeah, especially when it ends very well.
Yeah. And this one was interesting because they had the aspect where they couldn't even talk directly to each other. So he talks about that, how it's bittersweet because they weren't able, she spoke Hindi and he didn't remember Hindi. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
And then,
well, it also said that her name had changed.
Yeah, because she converted to Islam.
Yeah.
As far as the writing, I did think he wasn't the best writer, which memoirs, I was counting, and I've read like almost 10 memoirs through the course of this podcast, and only like maybe one of them I thought was really well written, because someone writing a memoir, they have a really interesting story, but that doesn't mean they're a good author.
Right.
But I felt like this book has a lot of potential, of course, so I'm going into the movie, I was hoping that they would really make use of the potential that this story had.
I don't feel like it measured up.
No?
Honestly, the movie was good, but disappointing too.
Yeah. So getting into the movie, just some random side facts. So this group was adapted by Luke Davies, and he's from Australia. And Saroo's story, so he knew of Saroo's story because it was on 60 Minutes and all these newspapers heard about it. And so after the book was released, he went and met with Saroo and his family to get permission to make it into a book. Oh, and also Luke Davies, he also adapted the screenplay for A Beautiful Boy, which is also a memoir. Did you see that movie? Mm-mm. It's with the one with Steve Carell.
No, I've been meaning to.
Yeah, but that's a really good one. So Luke Davies is definitely good at that. But they had a hard time finding like the money to make this movie because a lot of the American production companies wanted it to be set in America. But Luke Davies is Australian, and the director he's Australian or he's British now, I don't remember. But they were really adamant, like, no, this happened in Australia. We want to keep it in Australia.
Yeah.
So I thought that was good that they stuck to it, because so oftentimes it's switched to America because that's what the companies want.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And then, so both Garth Davis, the director, and Luke Davies, the script writer, they both went to all the locations Brierley talks about in his book. And Garth Davis said, "It was important for me to just walk in Saroo's reality as much as possible, and so I literally retraced his steps as best I could. I walked around his village by myself and imagined being a little boy growing up in that area. I sat on a bench in the Burnpur train station where he woke up alone, and then on to Calcutta and the main train station, Hura, where the full force of the story really hit me. I have my own kids, and to imagine a 5-year-old alone here, unable to speak the language, that's when I knew this was going to be a really powerful film." Which, before we get into the movie, I was wondering, like, as a mom yourself, and you have a boy who's 4, like, would you imagine your son in that as you were reading? Or are you able to detach and just focus on the story?
I feel like I focused on the story as I read it, and then, I mean, obviously afterwards as I think about it, or like during, I think about, how my 4-year-old speaks, and yeah, it'd be crazy. And just the fact that he was ignored because there are so many lost kids in Calcutta. So yeah, it'd be way scary. And then as a parent, and she couldn't even be there all the time because she was a single parent with 4 kids, and she had to make a living, and so they would be left alone for days on end. So yeah, I can't imagine her life, and just thinking of a little boy lost in a huge city, and the fact that he survived and flourished even, and then was able to find them again, especially with how far he ended up traveling from his hometown all the way to Calcutta. That was
crazy.
Yeah, it really makes me wonder what was going on with that one train car that he took.
Yeah, because he says it was empty, and he doesn't, like, there was never anyone else on there.
Yeah.
I think he said he wonders if it was like a maintenance train or something. That makes the most sense.
Or they needed more cars, and so this was just purely grab the extra car from wherever and then take it all the way there.
Yeah, that's what I think must have happened.
Yeah.
But to talk about the acting, so I was surprised, like, the first half of the movie, so it's like 2 hours, and the first hour is just him as a kid, which usually, especially with child actors, I feel like they try to limit the time, and, like, you don't see any of the adults. Like, Dev Patel doesn't come until the second hour, so Sunny Pawar, who plays young Saroo, like the first part of a movie is really important because if people can lose interest, and so that's a lot on his shoulders, but I thought he was a great actor, and then he was just so cute. And I think, like, he would have been cute regardless, but seeing him play a character who's so vulnerable and lost, and your heart just goes out to him. So I was surprised, but I think it worked out really well having him.
Yeah, no, it was super cute. The only thing that I was disappointed by with that is that they didn't show him getting older. So when his brother was adopted, he was still the same age that he was when he was adopted, it made it seem like. And so I had a hard time with that. But I understand that he's a super cute little kid, and why would you want to switch or pay extra, to have someone else come in and
rehearse a whole new kid just to play this in-between role.
Yeah, I think I was more impressed with him, like the little kid. What's his name?
Sunny Pawar.
I was more impressed with Sunny Pawar than I was
the adult Dev
actor.
Patel. Yeah. Moving on to Dev Patel. I thought he did a good job. I'm a fan of him.
Yeah, he did.
I haven't seen a ton of his movies, but I watched Slumdog Millionaire, which he was like 18, and that was his breakout role. And so that movie made me want to seek out more of his other stuff. And I've, like, known about him, so I know who he is. But I also think he's pretty attractive, so that helps.
Yes, he is.
But he was nominated for an Academy Award for this, as well as a SAG Award and a BAFTA, and he won the BAFTA. And I was watching interviews, and he really, like, fought for this role. And while the script was still being written, they weren't even done with it, he, like, went to the house of the scriptwriter and knocked on his door and was like they had tea and talked about it and how much you wanted it.
That's cool.
And when I was looking him up, like, after Slumdog, he actually, like, he was a really good actor. So it's not like, it wasn't because he sucked, because he is good, but he had a hard time getting roles because he would audition specifically for Indian roles, but then people wouldn't hire him because they're like, oh, like, they're going to think we're hiring you just because you're the most famous Indian, so we don't want to be looked at that way, so we're going to hire someone else instead. So that's unfortunate, because if he was a white guy, he wouldn't have had a problem like that.
Yeah.
And then moving on to Nicole Kidman. So she was actually handpicked by the real Sue Brierley, and she's Australian, so that makes it even more fitting. And Nicole Kidman has adopted kids. Did you know that?
I didn't.
Yeah, so she felt like she really connected to the role in that way.
Yeah, I think she did a good job in her role.
Yeah. And Sunny Pawar didn't speak English. And so the way, or the kid who plays Mantosh, and so the way she would try to connect with them was by playing cricket, which they have a brief scene in the movie where they're playing cricket. But the rehearsal process was really long because they really wanted to build that relationship between them two without being able to speak. And so she talked about how that was different because with Dev Patel, it's, you know, there's two adults being like, okay, well, you're my son and I'm your mom. But with Sunny, she had to really create this relationship, like a mother-like relationship to really...
That's cool.
Yeah. And then Rooney Mara is like the somewhat fictionalized character of Lucy. So she's like a mix of different people Saroo had dated, I guess.
Yeah, which I didn't like.
Yeah, they made her much bigger. In the book, he mentions people he dated, but...
It wasn't until his girlfriends that as he was writing the book, that he called her by name. He just referred to... I think
it was Lisa.
Lisa, yeah.
But even Lisa, I mean, I guess she played a fairly big role in supporting him and stuff, but the movie definitely just made that bigger in general.
Yeah, I kept wondering when he was going to break up with her because I was assuming it was one of the girl that he was with at first who he ended up breaking up with, which there was a scene where they kind of broke up,
and then she came back later.
Yeah, and I was just like, what the heck? This is not how it was in the book. Yeah. I don't like that. Like,
which, it's annoying when Hollywood has to include a romance in everything, where it's like, sometimes a movie's good when it's just... when there's no romance.
Yeah, I feel like she had too big of a role, honestly. I would have liked to have seen maybe more interaction between he and his brother and his dad, too. I feel like his dad was hardly even in it, but he worked with his dad.
And his brother.
And so that whole thing was way overdone, in my opinion. I didn't like that. So I feel like the family connection that he talks about in his book wasn't there in the movie with his Australian.
Because they had this added drama and like...
Well, that, and even with actually his biological brother and sister, they weren't really in it. Like, he went and met his mom, and he hugged his sister.
But we never even, like...
You don't see the second brother.
Kalu or something. What was it?
I think it was Kalu.
Yeah. Yeah, he was just totally left out.
Yeah, and anyway, I just felt that made me feel a little bit sad because I feel like they deserve a part too, because their story was interesting as well, to hear their perspectives, and they totally just didn't even
mention them hardly.
Yeah, and how Saroo was taking care of Shaquila.
Yeah, in the movie,
and she remembered that, and she was so young, and he was so young. In fact, that they remember that they...
And the movie totally got rid of that bond, because in the book he talks about how he missed Shaquila the most because they were the closest.
Yeah.
Whereas the movie, which, because I knew Gudu was going to end up die, I felt like they were being not manipulative, but really focusing on Gudu. That way, by the end of the movie, when you hear he's dead, it's going to be more powerful. And so as they were building that up, I was kind of like, they're just doing this so that they can really get you by the end.
Yeah.
Which he was close to Gudu, but Gudu was gone a lot. So it was him and Shaquila who would be hanging out.
And probably even
the middle brother.
Middle brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish that they would have shown more of that in the beginning too, with the 5-year-old Sunny.
Yeah.
But
also with talking about his Indian family. So the actress who played his mom was Priyanka Bose, and she actually met the real, I don't know if you say it Kamla, because there's no A, so I think it's Kamla is his birth mom. And they met in person, and the actress said, "I could tell how her life has been. I got down on my knees and hugged her and thanked her for her courage." So just, obviously, she would carry rocks for a living, and then dealing with the loss of her son and just all she's been through, and yet obviously a strong person. And the fact that she stayed in that same town for 25 years and people told her she was crazy and that her son wasn't going to come back, but she felt that he was still alive.
Yeah. Mother's intuition.
Yeah. And there's a line in the book when Saroo meets his mom again, and they're talking and he's asking her about why she stayed in the same city. And it says, "She replied that she had wanted to stay near the house she had been living in when I disappeared so that if I ever returned, I would be able to find her. I was bowled over by the thought. It's true that if she'd moved farther away, I would have no chance of tracking her down. The strength of my mother's maternal instincts, her belief that I hadn't died and that I would someday return, seems to me now one of the most incredible aspects of this whole story." And I totally agree with that, and I wish the movie would have highlighted her more. Because she really was hardly in any of it, really.
No, she wasn't. I feel like they were playing on the boyfriend-girlfriend situation way more than they needed to. That could have been totally sidelined. So they could have focused on the people who were directly impacted by this story.
Yeah. Like his birth family, but also, like you said, Nicole Kidman even, the dad was hardly in any of it, but Nicole Kidman even, it seemed like her role wasn't too much.
No.
And yeah, like we mentioned, the family drama. So that, I think, is probably the biggest change, along with the girlfriend, but is Mantosh. Because in the book, unless he, like maybe Mantosh did have drug problems and Saroo just chose not to write about it. I don't know.
I feel like he breezed over something, like he had issues. And I got the impression that he kind of left the family in a way.
Well, it says they gave both sons an ultimatum where it's like either focus harder on school or join the military. And Mantosh chose the military, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
The book talks about how he was a difficult child, but then, we don't really know much. But he
kind of grew out of it, I thought that because they were so nurturing, he was able to find his confidence and not be such a troublemaker anymore.
And then, like you said, Saroo, Mantosh were working with their dad.
Yeah.
And so they definitely you would think they had a good bond, especially with that. So it kind of made me wonder how Mantosh felt watching this movie, being like, well, they're playing me out to be this drug-addicted guy who just causes drama and makes his mom sick.
Yeah.
When the book didn't mention any of that.
Yeah, I was wondering how... I imagine that Saroo had a lot of impact, like he had a lot of give.
Yeah.
He had a lot of say, I should say.
Yeah.
In the movie, but maybe he didn't, and that's why they kind of took these liberties. I don't know.
Yeah, they say that they meant like with the whole family, but again, who knows how much the family really influenced the movie. But yeah, so that change I wasn't a huge fan of.
Yeah.
And also, like we said, Saroo was working with his dad, and he kept his job the whole time. Whereas in the movie, it shows him like hitting a rock bottom where he quits his job and he's just kind of a mess, and he has the cliche board on the wall with all the pins and the lines, and
then dashing it all away when he's frustrated.
Yeah. Whereas in reality, he was obsessed because he would be on his laptop for hours in the evening.
And I'm sure
he kept his job.
And I'm sure he had some system, but I highly doubt it was taking up an entire room
with
them happening.
Yeah. So that part was a bit over the top.
Yes.
Yeah, we were talking about the Australian parents, which I don't remember the dad's name. I know the mom was named Sue, but I thought it was cool how in the book he talks about how the mom decorated the house with lots of Indian objects, and she had a family friend, a couple who were Indian, and so she would have Saroo and Mantosh hang out with them, and because that would be hard being a parent of someone who's from a totally different culture, and you don't want to like leave out their whole culture. Yeah. So I thought it was cool how much she tried to just really keep him in touch with that.
Yeah, she wanted them to know that that's where they came from.
Yeah. And then, so in the book, it doesn't talk about when he learned this, but the movie, like he mentions it in the book, but he doesn't talk about when he learned it. But the movie has it where he's talking to his mom, Nicole Kidman, and he's saying how, like, I'm sorry you couldn't have your own kids. You got stuck with us. And she's like, what? Like, I could have had my kids, but I chose to adopt. And so I was glad they included that because she had like a spiritual experience when she was young, like pointing her towards adoption.
Yeah.
And they didn't show this, but the mom, Kamala, the Indian mom, she had like a spiritual experience too, where she saw a vision of Saroo shortly after he got back.
Yeah.
There's a line in the book where he talks about, where the quote is, once I was safe and secure in my new home in Hobart, I thought perhaps it was somehow wrong to dwell on the past. That part of the new life was to keep the old life locked away. I think one reason I find stories of kids with estranged parents so interesting is because, like, it seems so important to know where you come from, like who you come from. And so, especially when you have really good adoptive parents, the conflict that you must have being like, you want to know, well, and he knew his mom, so he misses his real mom. Mm-hmm. But then feeling like, well, but then I'm ungrateful if I want to reach my birth mom because my adoptive mom is so loving.
Yeah.
And just all those complicated emotions.
Yeah, I feel like that is all a very legitimate feeling, feeling like this lost connection, and you feel that lost connection, and you want to make it a, found connection again. Yeah. And so, but yeah, you don't want to hurt the people that have helped you for the majority of your life. But I feel like I feel like in the movie they overplayed that too. Where he struggled with it in the book, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to tell them, but it wasn't this crazy thing.
Yeah.
At least he didn't make it seem like it was a crazy thing, even though I'm sure he felt crazy about it sometimes, but the actual actions he took weren't as extreme.
Yeah. Which in an interview, the screenwriter talks about meeting with Saroo and talking to him about, like, he specifically mentioned something about like asking him about more of the emotions he felt during the whole process, because the book he talks about his emotions, but I feel like
he also doesn't.
Yeah, and so it made sense that the script writer was like, okay, like let's really dig into this and figure out how you felt. And so in some ways, maybe as he was interviewing him, maybe Saroo said he did feel more conflicted, as the movie shows. I don't know.
Yeah.
But Nicole Kidman, in another interview I watched, she said how her favorite line is when he tells her that he was looking for his birth parents, and he says something about how, like, you know, I didn't know how this would make you feel, and I didn't know if you wouldn't want me to meet her. And she says, like, I want her to see you, and I want her to see how beautiful you are. And just that mother's love on both sides with both mothers, because Kamala was really, like, she wasn't jealous that he loved his adoptive mom. Like, they both, that pure love where it's like, I'm just glad you're safe and I want the best for you. And like,
yeah, they appreciated each other.
Yeah.
And I feel like you can see that because at the end of the movie they show a clip
of the real
of his mom's meeting.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really touching.
Yeah. Which the book didn't make me tear up. Like, you know, it was a powerful book, but the movie made me like tear up more than the book did.
Yeah, I would say that last clip, honestly, where the moms were meeting, but that's what did it for me. Not that I liked that Saroo had more emotion in the movie, because I feel like that was there.
Yeah.
He wasn't able to convey it in his book.
You know,
he was kind of just telling a story, and he's not maybe the best storyteller, but he was able to get it out the best way he could get it out.
Right.
Where the movie showed that he did have a lot of depth of feeling going on during this journey. And
in the movie too, they did a good job when he is reunited with his mom about how they weren't able to talk. And so in the whole scene, they're not really saying much, but you still just feel that emotion even without words.
Yeah. Sometimes you don't need words to show appreciation.
Yeah. And in the book, he said, when he's like meeting with his mom, he says, my return seemed to inspire and energize the neighborhood, as though it was evidence that the hard luck of life did not have to rule you. Sometimes miracles do happen. And I thought the movie did a good job with this too, because like all the people that came out and were surrounding them, and that's kind of how it was in the book too, is the mom kept inviting people in, being like, here, this is my son.
I wish that they had been indoors though, because they were outdoors walking towards each other, and I wish that they were inside. Yeah, I don't understand why they have to make changes like that, but I don't know. I don't understand cinematography as well as others. But
I don't know if it's like if they filmed it in the real place, and so maybe it would be too cramped to try to film it indoors or something, I guess.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, I'm sure that little tiny house got very crowded, and it would have been impossible to fit a whole camera crew in there too.
Yeah. But yeah, so that part made me feel emotional too, just like he and his mom gathering and the whole town gathering together, and feeling that love and that hope of that moment.
I also liked, I don't know if you have this in there, but how it talks about how his siblings were impacted by Guru's death and his disappearing. Yeah. And how ultimately they ended up being able to have, they had a lot more opportunity in life. And I thought that was, and it seems like Saroo appreciated that. Even though he had gone through hard things and he knew that his family had gone through hard things, he was also, I think, not that he said it, but I feel like he appreciated the fact that his siblings were able to get kind of ahead of themselves, whereas
go to school.
Yeah, whereas they wouldn't have been able to afford it before. Yeah, with all four of the kids.
Reading books like this makes me realize how many things I take for granted living in America, like public school. When I was in school, I don't think I appreciated it as much as I should, because in India you have to pay for it, and she couldn't afford to send all four. Yeah. So and feeling like there was a purpose to him getting lost, and like it's sad, obviously, that Guru died.
I feel like he was probably maybe his guardian angel. If he ended up dying soon after Saroo was lost on the train. Yeah. Maybe I'm being too religious about it, but I feel like maybe he was meant to be his guardian angel rather than here on Earth. Yeah. Doing something else. I don't know.
That's true. And I did like that last scene, one of the last scenes in the movie, where Saroo is in India and he's on the train tracks and he's remembering when he was walking the tracks with Guru. And
yeah,
I really like that.
Yeah, that was a cute part.
And then, so in both the book and the movie, he talks about how he left his adoptive parents a voice message. And it says, "My mother has thanked you, Mom and Dad, for bringing me up. She and my brother and sister understand that you and Dad are my family and they don't want to intervene. I love you." And in the movie version, it's basically the same, but there's the added part where at the end he says, "I love you, Mom, so much, and you, Dad, and Mantosh." So in the movie, he has a complicated relationship with Mantosh because Mantosh is causing a lot of stress on his mom and his dad. And there's a part where he says, he's talking to his mom, and he's like, "I hate what he's done to you," because of all that. And so he has a really complicated relationship. And I like that part because I think once Saroo met his birth family again, he felt more whole. And I think there's something about that where you feel more at peace with yourself and maybe more connected, and you are more willing to love and be forgiving to those around you. And so that's how I interpret it. Like, he had more capacity to be understanding and
a weight was lifted off his shoulders, so he was able to see things in a different light.
Yeah. And then, like we were saying, there's another line in the book about how he says, "I wanted to know where I came from, to be able to look at a map and point to a place where I was born, and to throw light on some of the circumstances of my past." So that just goes along with what we said about children who are adopted, feeling that need, like, to know where I came from.
Yeah. I think there's also a fear, too. Having known a few people who have been adopted, there's a fear of reaching out and finding that side of their family because it could go badly, too.
And so with Saroo, he had the benefit of remembering her. So it wasn't like, ooh, what is she going to be like? I don't know. Like, he did know what she was like. So that's true.
And it's amazing how many memories he does have. Yeah. Given that he was only 5 years old, and then he had all the trauma in Calcutta to kind of, maybe
shake him up or something. Which this book, so the last book I read, which was a memoir, he also talks about the science behind memory, basically. And then this book made me think of it because he talks a lot about how, like, there's all these memories. And so, like, I have a ton of quotes about memory. I don't know if I'll share them all. But in an interview I read, he said that he, like, locked himself away to write this book, and he would, like, do different things to get in the right headspace. And he said how, like, something would trigger a memory and open a door, and then that opened another door to all these memories he didn't know he'd had. And so those are, like, memories in their purest form, because when it's a memory, like we've talked about how it's a memory you think about a lot, like, it's a fact that you've changed a lot of that memory because you think about it so much.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when I read books now that are memoirs, it makes me wonder, like, like, how much of this is accurate? Like, I know they believe it's accurate, but how much really is accurate? But I think that's not to say that Saroo has, that his story isn't real, because I think a lot of it did happen, obviously. And I'm sure when he went back to India, that triggered a lot of memories that he'd forgotten about.
Right.
So just some, like, random thoughts and different changes that were made. So one, when he was a child, he talks about how fishermen found him and helped him, but then they introduced him to this guy that he, like, got a bad vibe from, and they were going to, like, put him into sex trafficking or something, kind of, like, something weird was off with the guy, and so he ran away.
I don't remember the fisherman.
Well, it was guys, but in the movie they had it be a girl who introduces him to this shady guy. And I thought that was an interesting change, because I feel like it makes it worse that it was a woman doing it, because women are supposed to be nurturing and more loving, I guess. And so when they had it be a woman, it almost made it feel worse that he was betrayed by this woman.
I feel like there were multiple things that they didn't go into in the movie. Like, he was with some family for a little while. Yeah. And then the mom was like, "All right, let's go." And he wasn't coming for some reason. And so she's like, "Well, you're not my kid. I'm leaving you."
Yeah. And so maybe they meshed those two together by having a big girl.
And there was the time that he jumped into the river twice and almost drowned. And this old homeless guy was, Yeah. I feel like there were a lot more things. Anyway, the movie was long, but I felt like it went by really fast. Maybe because I was thinking of all the things that are in the book. But yeah, I feel like there were a lot of moments where he was helped by people. And he obviously, like, he had that street instinct where he knew something wasn't right.
Yeah. So the end of the book also has this whole other section about him being in India, whereas the movie just kind of ends once he meets his mom. But in the book, he went on the train. He doesn't know exactly what route he took, but he took a train from his hometown over to Calcutta and just experiencing how long it was. And then in Calcutta, he went and visited the orphanage he stayed at, Mrs. Sood. And I thought the scenes with her in the beginning when he was a kid were really well done and touching. And especially the scene where she's teaching them, and the book talks about this, where she taught them like how to eat in a Western table and like you eat with a fork and you do this. In the movie, I thought that scene was really cute.
It was
when
cute.
She's teaching them.
Yeah.
The book, which I'm fine with the movie changing this, like a lot of things, they just need to, like the movie can't be super long. But in the book, he finds the town close to his hometown on Google Earth, and then he finds a Facebook group for that town, and he asks them about Ganesh Tillay, and that's how he finds it. And so the movie got rid of the Facebook part, but I don't think that's a huge deal.
It was interesting, though.
Yeah.
It was definitely one of the moments where I was very invested. I don't know. I liked that whole thing. So.
And it also shows just technology, obviously, because Google Earth, but also like what a blessing social media can be, because he, even with Google Earth, in reality, he wouldn't have even found his town if it wasn't for Facebook too.
Yeah.
So that was cool.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing that we haven't mentioned yet was just how he had this parameter that he was searching in, and then one random day he was tired of looking in his little confined parameter,
so he went out further.
Yeah, and that's how he ended up figuring it out.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's a crazy part too.
Yeah. I definitely think like it was all inspired. Like even him getting lost, I think, was meant to happen.
Yeah.
And Guru's death was meant to happen. And he, like we've said, like he says a couple times about like, I'm not a religious person, but like there seems to be a meaning behind all of this. So
he says he's lucky, but I feel like
it's more than that.
Yeah, it's far more than that. But
yeah.
And maybe one day he'll change his mind. Who knows? But either way, he appreciates what he's been through, which is, you know, I think important for people to have in their own lives, to appreciate what you have personally been through.
Yeah. And then the book also talks about his dad, which the movie, we don't hear about him at all. But in the book, his dad left them when his mom was pregnant with Shakila, and he married a new woman. And he, like, had interactions with him still, but they all, like, they weren't the best interactions. Mm-hmm. And his siblings, when he went back to India, his siblings are like, oh, we want nothing to do with him. Mm-hmm. But there's a quote where he says, "But although my family had sworn they would never have anything to do with him again, no matter what the circumstances, I couldn't find it in myself to feel the same. If my father genuinely regretted his behavior, then I could forgive him. Perhaps because I'd also made a decision that spiraled out of control. I could imagine that he might have had made a bad decision and everything else had rolled forward from there. I couldn't hate him for making mistakes. He remained my father even if I didn't really know him, and I couldn't help but feel that my reunion with my past was incomplete without his role in it." And I guess that almost seems like what we were talking about earlier about his ability to have compassion on others with Mantosh, but in the book it's with his dad specifically.
Yeah.
And at the time the book was written, he still hadn't met with his dad, and I don't know if he has yet. But yeah, I thought that was a good perspective on him to be like, you know, if he regrets it, then he deserves forgiveness.
Yeah, I like that too. Obviously, he wasn't there for whatever falling out had happened between his siblings and their father. So he's missing that piece of whatever they went through. He doesn't have it.
That's true.
His last memory was going to meet his new stepbrother or sister, I can't remember. And he remembers it being awkward for his mom, but it was fine between he and his siblings, it seemed. Mm-hmm. So with that being his last memory of him, I feel like, yeah, I would probably want to go back and give him a chance too.
Yeah. Before we get into whether we like the book or the movie more, do you have any other last thoughts about changes that were made? Were there any changes in the movie that you liked?
I mean, I did like the show of emotion, I guess, a little bit more in Saroo. I think that's probably about the only thing that I liked really well. And the actors did a good job. I feel like it could have been better for the last half. Like the script could have been written better so that there could have been a little bit more, you know, just outside the boyfriend-girlfriend issues. And yeah, I would say I just liked the emotion. And I liked to see the part where little Saroo is freaking out on the train because he can't get out.
Yeah.
And So there were a lot of like, and visually, I liked seeing, you know, what it was like there, because when you're reading it, you can't see it, and there's pictures at the back of the book, which I always like.
Yeah.
But I really liked that you know, the cameras were there.
Especially when he's in Calcutta, which in the book he talks about how crazy busy it is.
Yeah.
But then when you see it in a movie, you're like, wow, like, no wonder he got lost, because of, also he's just this short little kid. No one even notices him.
Right. And I really enjoyed actually hearing them speak. Like, I enjoyed hearing them speak Hindi.
Yeah.
And whatever other Indian languages were in there. I don't know. And Australian. So I liked that, just being able to hear and see things.
Yeah. Which Dev Patel is British, so he tried to get more of an Australian accent for the role. I thought he did a good job.
Yeah.
Oh, and you talked about him being on the train, and I also liked how when the plane is taking off going to Australia, and then you hear the sounds of the train going too. Mm-hmm. And so just, I don't know, the kind of trauma that had, and he's leaving again, and like the fear he must have felt being like, man, I'm going somewhere else brand new. I don't even know.
Yeah, and by himself.
Yeah. Which
I thought was also interesting, that he wanted to go on his first visit by himself. I was wondering if I would want that.
Yeah, me too. I thought that was an interesting choice.
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, I'm not him, but I feel like I would. Like, but maybe not. I don't know.
I get why he wanted to do it on his own. I think it also could have been a really cool experience to share it with someone else, though, too, rather than have it just be his experience. But it was his journey initially, so that's why he wanted to do it by himself. But yeah, the movie doesn't show it, but in the book, his adoptive parents and his girlfriend wanted to go with him. Yeah. But he's like, no, I'm doing this on my own. Yeah. So yeah, I thought that was interesting, too. So on to book or movie. So you've already said you like the movie better, or the book better. Yes.
Sorry. Not the movie. Yeah. If I was to recommend someone to this story, I would say watch the movie first and then read the book.
Why watch the movie first?
I just have a hard time when I go from book to movie, especially right away, and it's all very fresh in my mind.
So they'll appreciate the movie better if they do it first.
I think that you will appreciate the movie far better. And I'm also curious. I wish that I would have watched it first, because I'm curious if I would have been more confused or if I would have been less. I felt like I kept thinking back on the things that happened in the book, you know, as I was watching the movie, and you know, either not liking the changes or, you know, wondering why they changed it. And then just trying to remember all the things that I read in the book, where I feel like if I'd watched the movie first...
You could have just been in the movie.
Yeah, I would have been immersed in it, and then I would have read the book and been like, oh, wow, this also happened, and I would have been thinking of the movie, which is more sparse as far as information and all that. And maybe I would have felt maybe more of his emotion in the book because I watched the movie first.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely the book. But I would say the movie's really good too. Just watch the movie, then read the book.
Yeah. I think if someone isn't into reading, which if they're listening to this podcast, they maybe are into reading. But yeah, I would definitely recommend both. I almost think I like the movie better, even though it doesn't have as many details. It still captures the heart of the story. And yeah, and like I said, the movie I felt was more emotional and more powerful in that sense. And so I almost would go with that. But if you watch the movie and are really grabbed by the story, then the book is definitely worth reading, because you get to hear all these other added parts to it. And a lot of movies, when it's based on a true story, it's like, take that with a grain of salt, because chances are they changed a ton. So compared to other movies that are based on a true story, I feel like they stay pretty close to the truth with this.
Yeah, I feel like the feeling was similar. Yeah. For both the movie and the book, but I'm for the book.
Yeah. And I have noticed on here, if it's a movie that I've seen before and then I read the book and then I watch the movie again, chances are I'll like the movie better versus when I read the book and then watch the movie. Like you said, I'm more critical of the movie. So I've noticed that as a pattern on podcasts where I pick the movie, chances are it's because I'd seen the movie first.
Interesting.
Although with this one, I read the book first, and I think I prefer the movie. But I wanted to end with this last quote from the book, which is kind of like what we talked about how it was all meant to be, basically. But it says, "It's true, too, that my Indian family has received opportunities they would not have had otherwise had none of this taken place. I feel strongly that there is an element of destiny in these events intertwining my two families and me as the linchpin. It is sometimes difficult not to imagine some forces at work that are beyond my understanding. While I don't have any urge to convert that into a religious belief, I feel strongly that from my being a little lost boy with no family to becoming a man with two, everything was meant to happen just the way it happened, and I am profoundly humbled by that thought." And then with him being a lost boy in India, it worked out for him. But I thought it was cool that the movie, I think I don't know if I read this or if it says it at the end of the movie, but they had a website where you could go and donate and help, because there's like 25,000 lost children in India.
An immense amount. Yeah, it was at the very end of the movie.
Yeah, so I thought it was cool that they're bringing more awareness to that. And it made me be like, man, like maybe I should adopt, which the Sue Brierley was for adoption because she was like, there's enough people in this world. I don't need to bring more into it. And I don't totally agree with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with having your own kids. But it definitely made me think more about adoption and the importance of that, and how selfless she and her husband were by having they didn't care the age or anything. And so adopting someone who's older and with this baggage is a hard undertaking.
So I think adoption is a very worthy thing to do. One of my brother-in-laws is adopted, and he's got his own set of issues, and you're not adopting for the short term, just like when you have kids. But even like Saroo says in the movie, I don't know if they said this in the book, but how, having your own babies and kids it's like a blank slate. And that's not totally true, but as far as like adopting an older child or
who's had these past experiences or traumas,
especially if it's a traumatic past, I admire those people a lot, because it's not easy to raise kids.
But I guess that wraps it up for Lion / A Long Way Home. And thanks to Emily for joining me, and I'm sure we'll have you on more.
Thanks for having me. It was a good read and fun to do.
Yeah. And join me for next week's podcast, where I celebrate 1 year of podcasting and blogging. So that'll be a fun one. I'll be sharing some of my favorite adaptations and some of my least favorite, as well as what got me started doing this blog. And yeah, it'll be really fun. So you should tune in for that one. And thank you. Thanks for listening. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, head over to my site, whythebookwins.com. You can leave a comment there and I will be sure to reply. You can also find me on Instagram under the same name, Why the Book Wins, and you can message me there, and don't forget to follow. And also don't forget to subscribe to my podcast and join me next Wednesday for the newest episode of Why the Book Wins.